He's a member of parliament. He served as the Minister for Environment and Forests under the UPA government. And we're very glad to have him on the show. Mr. Jairam Ramesh, welcome to Earth Talks. I'm going to start by taking a deep dive into the conversation. And a few days ago, you wrote a letter to Mr. Prakash Javadekar. I would say it's a strongly worded letter in which you have commented on the draft EI notification 2020, in which you have said that his suggestions were, I quote, unfounded and based on misinterpretations. So let me start by asking you, what prompted you to write this letter?
Well, this has been, this draft notification is not a surprise. It's come in a long series of dilution of environmental laws and policies that we have seen over the last 5-6 years. The emasculation of the National Green Tribunal, for example, the opening up of the no-go areas, rich, high-density forest areas to coal mining, the green signal to 4-laning or 6-laning of national highways and broad gauges lines through critically ecologically sensitive areas like in the Western Ghats. And generally, a notion that environmental laws are regulatory burdens, obligations, but in the name of ease of doing business, we should do away with environmental regulations. Is that, this COVID crisis is a public health crisis, no doubt. It's got economic implications as well. But deep down, it's a reflection of environmental management. It's a deep down, it's a reflection of how nature has been disturbed, not just in India, but across the world. And then, of course, you have our Prime Minister, the Environment Minister, waxing eloquent in all international forums on India's commitment to contain global warming, and quoting from the Rig Veda and the Atharvaveda and some nice Sanskrit shloka. But are you walking the talk? I mean, that's the question that I have. And I've been in this consistent parliament over the last few years. And this draft EIA notification, in my view, is really in the environmental coffin, so to speak. And that's what really prompted me to write this strongly worded letter.
Okay, you say environmental coffin. That's again a strong phrase to use. What are your specific objections to the draft EIA notification? Specifically, what are you objecting to?
Well, I have actually in my letter to the Honorable Environment Minister, I have raised 5 very specific, very pointed objections. First, this notion of post facto approval is a bogus concept. That anybody can come start a project and then say, "Oh, I forgot to get the environmental approval, the environmental and forest clearances." I think this post facto approval is completely a bogus approval. Mm-hmm. Second, public hearing was central to the EIA notification of 2006. Now, I know there's a lot of weaknesses in the system of public hearings. My own experience was that where you have public, you don't have hearings. And where you have hearings, you don't have the public, sort of public hearings. Public hearings democratizes decision making. Affected by projects, into the ambit of decision making. So that's the second specific objection. The third objection is that for a large number of projects, environmental impact assessment is simply done away with. You just do not have a large class of projects. So that's, I think, a third specific objection. Fourthly, if you've seen my letter, you will see that you get an environmental approval for a project, and then you expand that project, and then you say no, you don't need the approval for the expansion. Now, how is it? You have a 1 million ton refinery. The pollution load of a 6 million ton refinery is quite different from a pollution load of a 1 million ton refinery. So this notion of expansion not necessitating environmental approval, again, goes against the spirit of environmental laws. And finally, the fifth and final objection is that you're saying the central government will set up state-level environmental impact assessment authorities. This goes against cooperative federalism. It completely bypasses the states. It emasculates the states completely. So these are my 5 objections. I mean, I know a lot of people, activists, have been sending representations to the minister and so on. Mm-hmm. But from my point of view, to me, these are the 5 main objectionable features of the notification.
Okay, so let me ask you, most people would argue that even when you were the minister, the track record for environment clearances, some would argue were the same. Same in the sense that it was equally bad as far as environmental protection was concerned. Your commitment was first to businesses and to the economy. So it's not like the track record has changed. A lot of people would argue that whether it's the Congress or whether it's the UPA or it's the NDA, the commitment to the environment still doesn't, it still remains wishy-washy. What would you say to that? That businesses come first.
I have any violent objections to that point of view. I think all political parties pay lip service to the environment. To me, as I have said repeatedly, the only political leader in the last 50 years who's walked the talk was Indira Gandhi. There's nobody else. Everybody else, every political leader pays obeisance to environment, is not willing to stand up for enforcement of environmental laws. So I'm not saying this is an NDA making. I think we have abundant evidence to show that devastation has caused havoc, whether it's air pollution, whether it is water pollution, whether it's chemical contamination, whether it is land degradation, and health cost. Forget NDA, forget UPA. As a government, we need to take environment far more seriously than we have. And my fear is that in the desire for economic recovery, out of the COVID crisis, the first casualty will be environmental laws. Government will say, "Abhi isko chodo. We'll worry about it later. We need to get more investment." And that, to my mind, is going to be a suicidal step.
So what would you say a post-COVID recovery plan for the economy? Because the government would argue, as you yourself have said, that we need to turbocharge the economy. So whether it's reviving coal plants or it's looking at livelihoods which may impact the environment, they may say this is what we have to do. So what should a post-COVID recovery plan look like with green shoots?
Well, I'm not saying that recovery is going to be easy, revival is going to be easy. But if revival is going to come at the cost of the environment, then I think we are going to suffer a double blow. I think that this is not a moment to relax the enforcement of environmental laws. I mean, today's newspaper, I read that the NGT has protested to the ministry. Every effort has been made in the last couple of years to destroy the National Green Tribunal. The National Green Tribunal was an important institutional innovation to bring some accountability into decision making. By the way, the NGT was very critical of some of my decisions too. So, it's not as if, some of my decisions were upheld by the NGT. The NGT was quite critical on some of but that's the way it should be. I mean, we are in a democratic setup. Environment is not a technocratic issue. It's an issue that affects people. People should be involved. And innovations like public hearings, these are all efforts to democratize, open up the decision-making process. So I'm afraid in the last couple of years, that trend has been reversed. Trend has been reversed.
Sure. So let me ask you at this point, you've raised your objections. Why are we not hearing the Congress party raise any objections to the EI notification 2020? You have raised your objections, but as a party, as a government, which is empowered
when I speak on behalf of the Congress party.
Okay.
We are, I'm speaking on behalf of the party. The Standing Committee on Environment and Forests and Climate Change is meeting on the 7th of August to consider this. So it's unfair to say that the Congress party has not, the Congress president has mentioned this in her meetings with the Congress members of Parliament. I think it's very disturbing. I think it's also disturbing the manner in which the government has dealt with social activists and environmental groups who want to make their voice heard. They're just choking all channels of communication, and I think that's very, very undesirable.
Okay. Now, my final question to you is: air pollution is a big issue. It concerns everybody. It's not like the government has separate lungs. It affects the rich, it affects the poor, it affects the urban, it affects people living in rural areas next to a thermal power plant in the city of Delhi. Smoke towers are being suggested as a possible solution to air pollution. What do you think, in your opinion, smoke towers can work?
Well, I've heard both sides. There are two views on this. It looks very attractive. It looks a techno fix, but I don't think pollution is going to have a techno fix. There's no instant techno fix problem. There's a problem of enforcement of standards on power plants. There's a problem of particulate matter arising out of construction activities. There's also the problem of the quality of fuel, which is used in our transportation sector. So it's a cumulative effect. Now I know smoke towers has been talked about. My view on this is that there's no harm experimenting. I'm not a fundamentalist either way on this. Right now, I am an agnostic. So it can be experimented with, and if it works, that's good. But I do not see it as a one-off instant solution. I think the problems are far more deep-rooted than simply installing a series of smoke towers.
All right. And my final question to you, 3 suggestions you would give to tackle air pollution. What are the 3 suggestions which you would give to the current environment minister? What should he do?
Well, I'm not in power, and I'm not in a position, to implement what I would like to do. But as I said, and you're absolutely right, air pollution has become a hugely critical issue. But when I was talking of air pollution 10 years ago, nobody listened to me. But since it's become a crisis in Delhi, everybody is now woken up to the issue of air pollution. Remember, there are places like Vapi, Ankaleshwar, Singrauli, Chandrapur, which are very high, Manali, which are very highly polluted, and there is a public health cost associated with it. So I think these are air pollution is something that first we need to enforce our standards. I think that's very important.
Yeah.
We have, not only in relation to air pollution, but generally in relation to environment, we have very progressive laws, and we have fairly rigorous standards. I think if you enforce them without fear or favor, then I think you will begin to see some difference. But I think it's the enforcement of the laws that I would give priority to. I think
Right.
clean fuel will begin to have some effect once we make the full transition to cleaner fuels. That will certainly begin to have an effect. But the enforcement of laws in relation to power plants and in relation to other industrial projects is absolutely essential.
All right. Mr. Jairam Ramesh, as candid as ever, thank you so much for speaking to Earth Talks. Thank you.
Very much, ma'am. Thank you very much.